Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. I'm so happy that you are here, even though I cannot see you. I believe in your energy and I feel it, and I'm so thankful that you've decided to tune in for the presentation of my graduate lecture recital entitled The Exceptional Muses of Jazz. It is my absolute honor and pleasure to present to you this research and amazing music that I've been working on and researching and learning about over this really hilarious 2-year journey of graduate school in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm so excited to finally have this finished, first of all, and to be able to share it with you all. So the way this is going to work is, as I stated, it's a lecture recital. So the first 20 minutes or so, you will hear and see a presentation that I gave last spring, a lecture on the exceptional muses of the swing era that will lead us into the musical program for this afternoon, and some more commentary on the history of women's inclusion in the historical canon of jazz, and what my hopes are, I guess, for the future. So as I stated, it has been really challenging to work through finishing and completing a jazz degree in the virtual setting. I mean, it's pretty challenging to be doing any type of education or engagement via Zoom for over a year now. So I absolutely feel like it's important to just take a moment of silence and of gratitude for those of us who have survived and to this point throughout the pandemic, and to acknowledge those of us who have not been able to make it here today with us as a result of COVID-19. Alrighty. And lastly, as the presentation of this lecture recital is not how we traditionally do things in the MSU jazz community, or really kind of any collegiate music program. Usually a recital would be happening in person and we would all be in the same room together. But for everyone's safety, here we are back in virtual land. But I just wanted to offer the start of a new tradition, and acknowledging and understanding the history of the land in which the institution that we all attend, Michigan State University, actually resides on. Coming out of this pandemic and doing a lot of reflection, I just think it's really important that we begin to have these conversations and give acknowledgement where acknowledgement is due. So here we go. Okay. We collectively acknowledge that Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the three Confederate... Okay. Okay. We acknowledge that Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the three fires of Confederation of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on the land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Native American nations, for historic Indigenous communities in Michigan, for Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Michigan State University more accountable to the needs of Native Americans and Indigenous peoples. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the program. Hey everyone, so this is my presentation entitled The Exceptional Muses of the Swing Era, an analysis of the inclusion, representation, and impact of female jazz instrumentalists during the swing era. So initially when we were assigned this project, I really wanted to do some deeper research into what I was addressing as the great women behind the men of the swing era. After being really inspired to think deeper about the lives of some of the men that we call our heroes and are recognized as jazz legends, as I learned more about jazz history and the people who have inspired me. And I thought it was really important to think about how their lives were actually able to kind of come into fruition as musicians, especially during this time. Um, and I think it was really important to think about, you know, who they had behind them, supporting them, whether that was their significant other, a friend, a mentor, a teacher, a sibling, um, you know, any individual that was really inspiring them to be better, or to even just kind of help them keep their lives together. As you know, I'm Professor Whitaker's graduate assistant, and I work directly with his assistant, who is also his wife, Mrs. Whitaker. And I know firsthand, if Miss Cookie was not there doing all the stuff that she does behind the scenes, that there would be absolutely no way, shape, or form Professor Whitaker and him doing all of the exceptional things that he does. So this presentation and all of the research I've been doing has kind of been centered around that kind of notion and thing that I wanted to look into deeper. So I think it's really important to kind of, as we have in this class all semester, addressed like the historical description of jazz musicians and the people that we recognize as jazz legends. The first thing that I did to find this image specifically was literally I just Googled legends of jazz. And, you know, this picture is pretty accurate in describing some of the prominent figures that we discuss in this class, and we also discuss in jazz just in general. I thought it was really important to kind of think critically and think deeper about this image, but also just the way that we historically talk about the prominent figures in jazz. So, like, who is included in this photo? Which jazz musicians are notably recognized, which is all of them? What words would you use to describe them? How much information about their lives do you have access to? Why do you know who they are? And do you know how they became successful? So, and also addressing some of the qualities or characteristics we often attach to these people that we have identified as the jazz legends that we look up to. You have this list between this photo of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So obviously you have arranger, composer, band leader, instrumentalist, pioneer, business owner, award-winning, a teacher, focused, ambitious, hardworking, passionate, unique personality, individuality, talented, and driven. And I think it's really important to note these characteristics specifically because they are not specifically for any type of person in regards to gender or race. And I think it's really important to discuss, you know, who is been included in the jazz canon, and why outside of their gender they have been included in this conversation. And to say that these attributes and all these characteristics can belong to a woman, as we all know, and often were attributes of women jazz musicians of the time that we don't know about or that we don't talk about. And so, you know, in thinking a little bit deeper about this, I also thought it was really important to note this question, and seeing all of these like really famous images of jazz musicians, you for the most part know who at least like the big 2 or 3 or top 5 are by face recognition. So you could recognize pretty much all of the men in these photographs. But would you know who the women in these photographs are if you didn't know the names of the men that they're captured next to? You know, I'm not going to say that I am beyond this kind of bias against women and being recognized in the jazz canon, because I absolutely would say no myself if I had not researched them and I hadn't done my homework and research to know deeper and to know more about the lives of these women. I absolutely would not know their names, and that in itself is a problem. You know, I have been playing jazz for 4 years. And as I am just now coming into thinking deeper about the history and my place in the future history of this music, it's been really important to think about how women who look like me have been portrayed or acknowledged or recognized in the past history of this music, and thinking about the ways in which I can contribute to making sure those women, their stories are told and their voices are recognized, and they get the recognition that they deserve, and acknowledgement as jazz legends and greats as well, because without them, where would the music really have been? So moving on, to address the names of the women in these images, here we have Blanche Calloway, who is the older sister of Cab Calloway pictured. Mary Lou Williams, who's the actual teacher of Thelonious Monk, captured here. Mel Bliston, who's a trombonist, is a classmate and colleague of Dexter Gordon's. Alice Coltrane, who was married to and performed a lot with and collaborated with John Coltrane. And then here in the corner, we have Lil Hardin Armstrong, who's the wife and colleague of the one and only Louis Armstrong. So in revisiting this image, who's missing from this picture? And I think at this point, we all know who's missing from the picture, and it's the women, because it's not like women didn't exist during this time period. It's not like women weren't playing jazz during this time period. And it's not like women haven't contributed to this form of music at all. So why are they not included in this depiction and representation of the legacy of this music? So now I kind of would like to talk about the three women that I decided to focus on and research, to kind of share their stories, talk about their legacies, but also bring awareness to the fact that the only reason why a lot of information about these three women specifically is available is because of the impact that they had on famous male jazz musicians who are included in the legendary category of the historical canon. So all three of these women have either are recognized for having either influencing their spouse or encouraging their sibling to become better performers or musicians, or was a teacher to a group or a number of prominent and famous jazz musicians at one point or time or another. And that in itself is problematic, because there were other women that I wanted to research that I couldn't find information about because they didn't have a direct connection to a specific leader in the jazz history. So it was much harder to find information about them solely. So I wanted to take the opportunity to research these three women and really focus on their lives and their legacies as individuals outside of the context of the men that they're often affiliated with. So Lil Hardin Armstrong was obviously the wife of Louis Armstrong, as many of us know, and had a reputation for being one of the most influential figures in his life and pushing him to become the great jazz musician that he was. But outside of that, Lil was incredible. She was born in 1902 in Memphis, Tennessee, and started playing piano at a really young age in her church. And I think one of her first teachers was actually her third grade teacher. And she went on to study classical piano at Fisk University. And her mom really didn't approve of Lil playing jazz or playing the blues. And she really didn't want her to kind of get into that lifestyle. So she sent her away to Fisk to become a music teacher. But upon having some professional opportunities to play at a local music store and, getting to meet Freddie Keppard, Lil really kind of fell in love with performing and fell in love with jazz, and that kind of helped begin her lifelong journey and career as a jazz musician. One of her greatest influences is mentioned as Jelly Roll Morton, and her first big official jazz gig was when she was discovered by Lawrence Douay, who was also the band leader the former band leader of what is known as the King Oliver Band, and she joined in 1920, which is where she also met Louis Armstrong, and she led the Hot Fives and Hot Sevens with him in 1925, which is in this photograph where she is playing the piano. But some other things about Lil is that she worked as a pianist, a composer, a singer, a band leader, a manager, a singer-songwriter, clothing designer, and restaurant owner throughout her entire life. She led several bands for the Decca recording sessions, contrived of different combinations of all-star bands featuring really prominent jazz musicians during that time. One of her original compositions, entitled My Heart, was upon one of the first three tunes to be recorded by the Hot Fives with Louis Armstrong. And in her life, she composed over 150 works, including a tune entitled Struttin' with Some Barbecue and Just for a Thrill, which was her most popular hit from 1955 or 59. And she also played with Ralph Cooper, Red Allen, Zutty Singleton, Lonnie Johnson, Peanuts, Holland, and Sidney Bechet. The next person we're going to take a look at is Blanche Calloway, born February 2nd, 1903 in Rochester, New York. Briefly after she was born, her family moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and she's one of four children. In the Calloway household, their mother was a music teacher and their father was a lawyer. So the mother was always encouraging the children to learn how to play piano and to sing. And it was something that every single one of the Calloway children did, and they were really active in the music program at their church as well. But it was often expressed that Blanche's mother never really wanted her to become a professional musician by any means. So she sent her to Morgan State College, which is now known as Morgan State University today, to study to either become a teacher or a nurse. I think that she just desired for her to have a more seemingly practical or stable kind of career path. But Blanche, Blanche was a performer. Blanche was a star, so she wasn't going to let that hold her back going away to school to become something that she wasn't. And she actually had her first professional debut a year after she went to school and immediately left to go kind of work. And she got one of her first roles in a musical called Shuffle Along. And she was far more successful than her brother was. And she was the first successful Calloway. And by 1924, she had really a well-established music career as a performer. By 1924, and when Cab moved to Chicago initially to go to law school, she really took him under her wing and said, "This is everything that I know. If you want to get into this is how you got to do it. This is not for the weak, and you really have to be committed to doing this." And really shaped him into the Cab Calloway that we all know today. And they co-led a band together for a bit before she started working with Andy Kirk, and then she eventually went on to become the first woman to lead an all-male band with her band, Blanche Calloway and her Joy Boys, which is pictured here. And she also led some all-female bands, and was just this really incredible performer. Like, as we know that Cab is like the star of the show in his band, and you're watching him the entire time, everything that he learned was from her. So I can only imagine what seeing Blanche perform was like. And there are no recordings that I was able to find, or known recordings that I was able to identify within the research, that were recordings of her performing. So that's highly unfortunate, because we see the product of her skills, but not actually coming from her herself. She was also known as the Queen of Heidi Ho, which I think comes from the influence that she had on Cab's song, Minnie the Moocher, the kind of like call and response, Heidi, 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 hi. It was like, to my understanding, the story is like Cab was having some trouble like ad-libbing and forgot the lyrics, and she kind of like jumped in and said Heidi, 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 or something like that. So she's known as Miss Heidi Ho, or the Queen of Heidi Ho. Two of her biggest influences were Florence Mills and Ida Cox, and she actually did get the opportunity to do a show with Florence Mills in 1924, 1925, which I think is really incredible, getting to perform with the one person, that you look up to the most. She's also recognized as a composer, a singer, band leader, dancer, manager, and business owner. She was a manager briefly to a jazz vocalist by the name of Ruth Brown in the 50s. And she also started the first Black-owned mail-order cosmetics company called Ephraim House. And she also went on to become the first female DJ in Miami, Florida during the 1940s. And I also read that she was the first Black woman to vote in Miami at that time or like ever. So that's really incredible to have that be a part of her legacy as well. And just some other people that she performed with, including Andy Kirk, Benny Motten, Cozy Cole, Ben Webster, Vic Dickerson, Louis Armstrong, Richard Jones, and Sammy Stewart, who really kind of helped propel her career forward and kind of help her get her start as a band leader. And then the final woman that we're going to kind of talk about is Mary Lou Williams, who, as we already know, when we think about women in jazz, the first woman that you think about is Mary Lou Williams, because she's really the only female jazz musician who has been recognized and acknowledged in a very appropriate way, and in a way that is not necessarily attached to specifically the legacy of other people, but has enhanced as well as, uplifted her own legacy and her own acknowledgement as a solo performer and composer. And so we all know Mary Lou Williams. But I think it's really important to include her in this conversation, because without her, I don't think that we would even be able to address or think about, Lil and Blanche. And even though those two came before her, really, Mary Lou lived also through a lot of the jazz history, from playing ragtime like all the way through, the late 70s. Mary Lou was a part of that, and she contributed to the music, and she even once said that her music was keeping jazz alive during her lifetime. So born May 8th, 1910, Mary Lou was a child prodigy and started working professionally at the age of 6 years old, to support her family playing piano. And I was also reading that there was a moment in time where Mary Lou Williams was probably around 3 or 4, and she was sitting on her mother's lap, and her mother was sitting at a piano. And her hands hit the piano first, and she just started playing. Like, after maybe she had been sitting there a couple of other times seeing her mother play, and at this particular time her hands hit the piano first and she started playing, and it was incredible. Her mom just like sat her down in the chair and then ran to go get her neighbors and was like, look at what Mary Lou is doing. So she was exceptional and a spectacle from a very young age, and incredibly talented nonetheless. At 13, she was able to play in Duke Ellington's small group, and she also played with the McKinney Cotton Pickers at the age of 15. It's noted that she did spend about 10 to 12 hours a day at the piano as a child, and I think that's really important to note, because, although she was a prodigy, and although, she was incredibly gifted and talented from the start, she still spent a lot of time working at the piano and learning about the music and investing in the music as a child. And I think that's really important to note, that, the excellence doesn't just come from nowhere. It's devolved and is habitual. It's something that you have to work at. And she later went on to play and arrange for Andy Kirk's band for about 10 years. And one of her biggest arranging influences was Don Redman. And she wrote for and played with Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, the Dorseys, Cab Calloway, Glenn Gray, and Louis Armstrong. And I believe at one point in time in her, when she was a teenager, she was playing, I believe, with the McKinney Cotton Pickers, and she met Louis Armstrong and Fats Waller, and they were just enamored by her playing. They picked her up, and they were like, I guess, I don't know, being really weird, but like trying to show that they were really excited and encouraging of her being in jazz and playing jazz music, and really just kind of being supportive of her during that time, and just really blown away by her talents. So she's known as the lady who swings the band. That's kind of like one of her like staple nicknames. Also known as a composer, pianist, band leader, arranger, mentor, teacher, and she also owned her own record label. She mentored and taught pretty much every prominent bebop musician from the 40s, including Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Art Blakey, Kenny Dorham, Thelonious Monk, and so many more people not included in this list specifically. But she was a really vital part in teaching the musicians during that time and mentoring them. And she's also a 2-time Guggenheim Fellow, and she was also a really important part of developing the Kansas City jazz scene earlier in her life. Her piece, The Zodiac Suite, I believe was the first time that jazz and symphony orchestra were performed together at Carnegie Hall, and that was the first time that someone had um, written a piece that helped jazz be taken more seriously and to be considered serious music. And a little bit later in her life, she went on to be an artist in residency at Duke University, where she was also teaching and directing their big bands and writing for the big bands when they were performing her original music at Duke in the late 70s. And after she passed away, they named a center for her, the Mary Lou Williams Center for Black Culture, on their campus. And now the Kennedy Center also, and then I believe they started in the late 90s, started a Women in Jazz Festival named after Mary Lou Williams in honor to her dedication and talents and contributions to jazz over the course of 5 decades. So as we just kind of looked at all three of these women, and we discussed earlier the list of attributes that describe these jazz legends, all three of these women have, these are just to name a few, but all three of these women fully had those as ways to acknowledge and describe them as really strong leaders, incredible musicians, incredible people, and just talented overall composers and performers. And I think it's really important to note that, their legacies really paved the way for, the recognition and acceptance of women in jazz today. This is a picture, I believe, that was taken maybe a year or two ago for a Vanity Fair article. And these are some of the top jazz musicians in in jazz today. And as you can see, it's this picture is incredible and includes so many different types of women from literally all over the world. I know where all of these people are from, and it's not, it wasn't from like one specific area or coming from one specific lineage. Anyway, so that was kind of like my presentation on the exceptional muses of jazz, and really kind of honing in on the point that women were an incredibly vital part in contributing to the music of jazz, whether it was acknowledged on the front lines or if it was behind the scenes. And those stories are just as important as, hearing the mysticism of the great Charlie Parker or the great John Coltrane, and how, their talents just belied them into these incredible legacies, and they kind of just appeared out of nowhere. Like, it's really important to acknowledge where people come from and what their lives looked like before they became and were acknowledged as these legends. So that is my presentation. Thank you. before we wrap up this incredible journey that you all have gone along on with me, I just wanted to take a moment to explain. I'm gonna talk a bit about the music that you've heard so far, as well as say some thank yous. So we started the program off with a composition entitled Step Forward, and that is featured on the newest Artemis record entitled Artemis on Blue Notes Records, and that is written by the bassist Narika Ueda, so thank you so much. The second tune is original composition by Mary Lou Williams entitled St. Martin de Porres that I adapted for jazz octet. It's originally written for choir. The third piece was an original composition of mine entitled Meditations on Four Women, inspired by Nina Simone and her composition entitled Four Women, which is depicts the lives of four different Black women and shares the experience of Black women in America, and recognizing the voices of Black women. And so I wrote a piece inspired by that message and inspired by Nina's lyricism and music. And lastly, the song that you just heard is an original composition of mine entitled Forgotten Promise, which was originally written for string quartet as a part of a collection of music that I wrote in 2019 called Songs for Little Red Riding Hood. And it was the first time I'd taken a composition that I wrote for traditionally classical setting and adapted it to jazz. So I hope you enjoyed that version of it, and look forward to performing it a lot more in the future. And the last tune that we're going to close off with is really, really important to me because in jazz, you know, it has a strong history of women being underrepresented and the value of women not being at the highest standard or highest level in regards to respect and acknowledgement. There's a very famous jazz standard entitled Wives and Lovers that has some pretty horrific, outdated lyrics, and I took it upon myself to rewrite them to perform with the Sisters in Jazz combo for the Jazz Education Network 2021 conference. And so that is what we'll be seeing as the last piece on this concert. And I just wanted to take a minute and give some thank yous. This is something that we traditionally do at the end of a recital in our community. And although we don't have the food this time, you know, I want to make sure that I acknowledge everyone who's been on this very long journey of education and exploration and growth and healing and growing to love myself and just spreading my voice and my mission in my community. And so I just want to say thank you so much to anybody who has ever showed up to an event of mine or listened to a piece of my music or just encouraged me to keep going, because it has been so hard. And just know that anyone who's ever reached out to me and supported me, like, you are the reason why I'm sitting in front of you today, being able to put together a concert like this and being the artist that I am. So thank you so much. And that you know, includes my mom and my family. My mom and my aunt have held me down at my journey, my 8-year-long journey here at MSU. And I just have to give them a very special shout out, because without them, you know, I would be absolutely nowhere. And I'm so thankful for them, as well as my other family. I also want to thank my best friend, Sophia Rabiella, and my beloved partner, Trevor Johnson. You both, with every fiber of my being, I just want to say thank you so much for everything. And I'm going to leave it at that, because you know exactly what I mean. And my roommates, Jared and Patrick, who we've had a long pandemic together, but I love you so much, and thank you for, you know, holding me down, and thank you for uplifting me and encouraging me and inspiring me every single day to continue to grow as a musician. And that goes also for the MSU Professors of Jazz. I want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for every ounce of knowledge and time that you've poured into me over these last 5 years. Being a jazz musician was not something that I ever saw myself becoming, and I'm so proud of the community that I've gained and the lineage that I come from now, and that I am a part of this music because of you all. And I will never be able to repay you for the gifts that you've given me. So thank you so much. Also, I've had, because of this amazing community, And because of how amazing the program here is at Michigan State, I've been able to make music with so many amazing people outside of the city of East Lansing and throughout the state of Michigan. And so I just want to say thank you to all the musicians and promoters and club folk that I've been able to work with in the state of Michigan, and helping me become a well-practiced artist and supporting my voice and supporting my message. I also want to give a thank you to the Sisters in Jazz Combo for the Jazz Education Network for performing this arrangement that I put together, and for also just being a collection of really incredible musicians and human beings. And thank you to Ingrid Jensen and Ellen Rowe and Marion Hayden for mentoring us, and Marion Hayden specifically for mentoring me and pouring into me. But it was so incredible to get to work with Ingrid and Ellen as a result of being a member of the combo. And also I had the opportunity to do an amazing 2-week residency in this pandemic called the Woodshed Network. And that is all thanks to Dee Dee Bridgewater and Tulani Bridgewater. And I just want to say thank you so much for seeing the light in me and for encouraging me to believe that I have the light inside of me. And that, I have a lot of work to do in this music, and I'm ready and I feel prepared because of the guidance and the nurturing that they've given us in this residency and the sense of community. Like, I also want to thank all of the women in the Woodshed Network who I've gotten to meet as a result of this mentorship community. And I'm so looking forward to later this fall being out in New York City and getting to make music with you all and getting to make music with folks on the East Coast. And I'll be continuing to do my internship with Chamber Music America that I started this semester through the summer. So I'm really looking forward to that. And also, I want to say thank you to all of the women in the MSU Jazz Studies program. It is a true honor to have gotten to work with you all and to continue working and playing with you. I'm eternally inspired by you, and I so look forward to making more music together in the future. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you to Terry Lynn Carrington and Dr. Kernodle for being true pioneers in this music and in relation to academia, and really creating a path for women like me and for women in jazz and in music in general, and for emphasizing the importance of including the representation of Black women in music. That is a gift, and I'm so incredibly thankful for the lives in which they've led to create space and a place for me to have a platform to speak on my experiences and to share information with folks and to spread knowledge and most importantly to share great music. And I also want to thank all of the women jazz musicians who've come before me, and thank you so much for your contributions to this music and to our culture. And I so look forward to honoring you throughout my career and throughout my time playing this music, and just thank you. So I think that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you again so much, and please enjoy this last tune entitled Hearts and Dreams. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and until next time.
Do you want to become? Just know that the choice is yours. Don't think because you don't see many women, it's something you're not cut out for. Just follow your heart and chase your dreams too. Place your choices. No